And for you, this whole foray out of a corporate environment into an entrepreneurship environment was because you wanted to specifically help people of color understand money and grow wealth. What are some things that you have seen over this decade or even as of current that we're deficient in as far as our knowledge base goes?
Yeah, 100%. While there's a lot more interest in the realm of investing in the market. When I do surveys periodically, the vast majority of people are still very uncertain about what it means to invest in the stock market, right? They're still very adamant about tucking all of their money away in the bank account. And as we know, with inflation and what it's doing, that's just not sustainable, right? So the area of investing is a very big pitfall, I would say, for most people of color. Another thing is it's super fundamental, but having a true handle on your cash flow, having a real solid cash flow strategy to know where every dollar is going so that you can even have the available resources to know where to put it to make it work for you, right? A lot of people are just, I call them, bank balance entrepreneurs or bank balance, working professionals, meaning what they do is they log into their online banking. If there's money there, they spend it. If it's not, okay, oops, what happened, right? It's almost like back in the day when you were in college, if you went to college and the grades came out and you weren't super certain of like how you did and you were afraid to log in, you kind of like covered the screen a little bit and like were nervous to look at it. That's how people feel every Tuesday when they log into their online banking after those pending charges post, right? And so just really having a solid cash flow plan that works for them. And what I realized, the reason why there's a deficiency there is because it's called personal finance for a reason, right? While I have a voice in this space, you guys have a tremendous voice in this space, and there's plenty of others. Yes, there's a lot of commonalities in the thread of what it means to be fundamentally sound, but you have to do something that aligns with the way that you see the world, right? Because there's a qualitative metric of financial planning and there's a quantitative metric. So the quantitative aspect is X's and O's. I make this, I spend this, if I should be able to save this and invest that, right? But the qualitative metric is, does this spending align with what I say I value, right? What is it that I want most out of life? Because when you can conceptualize that, it makes it a little easier to be committed to where those resources are going to be allocated. Because if you're just saving money and budgeting because it's the right, smart adult thing to do, you're probably going to fall off the wagon. The same way the person who wants to get a six pack just because it's summertime, right? What's going to happen as soon as fall and winter rolls around? You have to have a deeper intrinsic reason as to why you're doing what you're doing. And that is what I found a lot of people to be proficient in. And that's across the board, not just with people of color, but that's something that I've seen consistently is people not really drilling into that deeper why. So they can really latch on to the decisions they need to make to move the needle.
Yeah, and I think that deeper why and the lack of appropriate decisions around money management, I think, you correct me if I'm wrong, should be a precursor to the foray into entrepreneurship. And here's why I say that, because a lot of platforms are created currently because entrepreneurship is cute. And so they do a lot of content around the power of entrepreneurship, which is true. It is a powerful thing, but it can also set you back if you go into that without even understanding money, like you just talked about, power of cash flow and things of that nature. So we're here to talk about entrepreneurship, but as a precursor, what would be your admonishment to people that they should understand prior to taking this leap or trying to build something in additional as far as an income stream to their 9 to 5?
Great question. And I agree wholeheartedly. It definitely is a precursor. The first thing you want to know about entrepreneurship is like, when you're in corporate America, right, it's very black and white, right? It's like, okay, I make 60,000, 80,000, 100,000. Uncle Sam is going to take his cut and then the rest hit your bank account and you can use 100% of that to live how you want to live, right? With entrepreneurship, you got to realize that you have to allocate your money in a variety of ways. So let's just say you have the coveted six figures. Everybody wants to make $100,000, right, or more, right? So let's say you hit that 100,000, right? A portion of that 100,000 has to be allocated to keep the lights on for the business, like the fundamental expenses, right? So for this podcast, they're not giving us these mics away, right? They're not giving us this software to be able to record. So what are the fundamental expenses I got to cover just to keep the lights on? Then you got to factor in, well, I don't want to stay where I'm at. I want to grow, right? I want to be a solo entrepreneur forever. I might need some support staff. I might need a VA. I might need different people that are going to help me grow this thing. I might need more systems, technology, infrastructure. So then you got to be thinking about a portion of your budget of the money that's coming in for growth purposes, right? So that you can get your business to the next level. Then, right, not even thinking about taxes and reserving money for that, because it's not like your job where, Uncle Sam's going to get his on the front end. You have to proactively make sure that you're carving out a portion of your budget for taxes, right? I think Carter's been on this podcast and he probably gave you all the tips and strategies on that, right? But then from there, then you can identify, okay, well, what portion of this is realistic for me to pay myself to sustain my lifestyle? Because what'll happen is the average person will think, well, once I make 100,000 in my business and I was making 100,000, corporate, I can leave. But the problem is you're probably spending a good portion of that 100,000 on your current lifestyle. And if you're making 100,000 in your business, you can't factor that all as income that you can leverage for your lifestyle. So that's the first thing, is you have to really understand the different buckets that you have to allocate money towards to grow your business. The second thing I would say is, what kind of as a piggyback off of that, is you have to keep your highs low and your lows high. Here's what I mean by that. Going back to the example of corporate America, your paycheck is going to be the same every 2 weeks unless you get a raise or a bonus, right? It's going to be the same. And entrepreneurship, the reason why it's glamorized is because you can be your own boss and set your own hours. You can make unlimited income. Sure, you can. Absolutely. You can do a lot of things, but it doesn't mean that it's always going to be predictable and consistent. You're going to make the exact same amount of money every time. So what you have to do is have that fundamental cash flow plan and say, okay, when I did the math, I can afford to pay myself, let's call it in this example, $4,000, right? Great. So if you have a great windfall month where brand deals come in and however it is you make money, you make way more than your traditional average, you still pay yourself that $4,000, right? Because as a business, you need operating reserves for the ebbs and flows that you cannot foresee, right? And so that's something that everybody has to know going to entrepreneurship. And you also need capital reserves for growth opportunities, right? So those are things that I didn't know 100% going into it, but because I was going into an industry where my job was to help people with their money, I was able to learn it pretty quickly, because I always tell people it was hard to say back then. Gosh, it was so hard to say. But like, I got into financial services, right, at some point as a financial advisor who was an entrepreneurial advisor, right? The caveat to that is, while I had the experience and credentials at that point, it didn't negate the fact that I still was a new entrepreneur, right? And it was very hard to say that back then, because it's like, who am I, this, money guy, right? But he's starting a business. And I'm like, sometimes I'm trying to figure it out where it's coming from too. You know what I mean? Because entrepreneurship is that different than managing money or just, having cash flow. So it's like, you really have to understand, just because you're good at something and that's what's prompting you to start a business does not necessarily exclusively mean that you know how to grow a business. You might just be good at something, which is why oftentimes we see the founder transition out of the CEO role as companies grow, because they don't necessarily have the CEO acumen to run the business. They're just a visionary, right? And you have to have the humility and understanding, okay, well, where are my deficiencies? How do I want to grow so that I can make sure this thing can last long term?